The knock on my apartment door came just after sunrise. I opened it half asleep, expecting a delivery driver or maybe a neighbor complaining about the music Evelyn played too loudly the night before. Instead, two police officers stood in the hallway with stiff expressions that made my stomach tighten instantly. "Mr. Carter Reynolds?" One of them asked. "Yeah. May we come inside?" I frowned. "What's going on?" The older officer lowered his eyes slightly. "There's been an accident involving your wife, Evelyn Parker." For a second, I honestly thought I misheard him. "What kind of accident?" "A vehicle collision near the coastal highway around 2 this morning." I stared at him blankly. "Okay, where is she?" Neither of them answered immediately. That silence destroyed me before the words ever could. "I'm very sorry, sir," the younger officer finally said softly. "Your wife didn't survive." My legs nearly gave out beneath me. "No." The words slipped out automatically. "No, that's wrong." The older officer stepped closer. "We identified the vehicle through registration records. You made a mistake." I shook my head violently. "You have the wrong person." "I'm sorry." 12 hours earlier, Evelyn had been standing in our kitchen wearing my old gray hoodie while arguing with me about another late-night phone call. "You've been acting different for months," I told her. "You barely even look at me anymore." She crossed her arms. "I'm tired, Carter. Not everything is some conspiracy." "Then who keeps calling you after midnight?" "Nobody important." That's not an answer. Her expression hardened instantly. "Maybe I don't tell you things because every conversation turns into an interrogation." "That's unfair." "No," she snapped. "What's unfair is feeling trapped every time I walk into my own house." I remember staring at her in complete disbelief. "Trapped," I repeated quietly. She grabbed her purse from the counter. "I'm going for a drive." "At midnight?" "Yes." "Evelyn, I can't breathe around you right now." Then she walked out the front door. That was the last time I supposedly saw my wife alive. The funeral happened 3 days later, but nothing about it felt real. The chapel smelled like flowers and rainwater. People whispered condolences I barely heard while I sat frozen in the front row beside Evelyn's family. The coffin stayed closed the entire service. I finally leaned toward Evelyn's mother. "Why is it closed?" Her hands tightened around a tissue. The damage was severe. She refused to look at me afterward. That bothered me immediately. Evelyn's younger sister, Sophie Parker, cried harder than anyone else in the room. Her shoulders shook violently while she buried her face in her hands. I moved beside her quietly. "Sophie." She looked up with red, swollen eyes. "I can't believe she's gone." Neither could I, but something inside me kept whispering that the entire room felt wrong. "She seems scared lately," Sophie suddenly whispered. I blinked. Scared of what? Her eyes darted toward their mother instantly. Then she shook her head. "Nothing. Sophie." She didn't tell me anything. Before I could press further, Evelyn's mother interrupted sharply. "The service is starting again." Her tone carried warning, not grief. That was the moment uneasiness crawled into my chest. After the burial ceremony, my best friend Caleb Hayes followed me outside into the cold parking lot. "You okay?" he asked carefully. I laughed bitterly. "Does it look like I'm okay?" "No." He shoved his hands into his jacket pockets. "Honestly, this whole thing feels strange." I turned toward him immediately. "You feel it too?" "The closed coffin bothers me. Her mother's acting weird." "And Sophie looked terrified," Caleb added quietly. I rubbed my face hard. "Maybe we're both losing our minds." "Maybe." He hesitated. "But maybe not." That sentence stayed trapped in my head long after everyone left. Later that night, I wandered through the apartment like a ghost. Evelyn's coffee mug still sat beside the sink. Her perfume still lingered faintly inside our bedroom. I opened the closet and nearly lost it when I saw her blue sweater hanging exactly where she left it. Everything looked normal. Too normal. I sat at the kitchen table and forced myself to check our finances because funeral costs were already piling up. That's when I noticed the withdrawal. $8,000 had disappeared from our joint savings account 4 days before the accident. I stared at the screen repeatedly, convinced I read it wrong. "Why would you do that?" I whispered into the empty apartment. My heartbeat started pounding harder. I checked again. The money was definitely gone. I grabbed my phone instantly and called the bank, but their offices were closed for the night. Frustration boiled inside me as questions kept multiplying faster than answers. Why would Evelyn secretly take money days before dying? Why did Sophie seem frightened? Why wouldn't Evelyn's mother look me in the eyes? Around midnight, I sat alone on the living room floor, surrounded by old photographs. One picture showed Evelyn laughing on a beach while wind blew through her hair. Another showed us dancing terribly in our kitchen after drinking cheap wine. I touched the edge of the photo carefully. What happened to us? I whispered. My phone buzzed suddenly beside me. Unknown number. At first, I almost ignored it, assuming it was another condolence message. Then I opened it. 3 words appeared on the screen. She is alive. Every breath stopped inside my chest. I reread the message 5 times before panic crashed through me completely. My grief vanished instantly, replaced by something colder. Fear. Because deep down, I already knew one terrifying thing. If Evelyn was alive, then someone wanted me to believe she was dead. Who sent this? I whispered. My hand shook so badly, I nearly dropped the phone onto the floor. I tried calling a number immediately, but an automated voice claimed the line no longer existed. Then another message appeared seconds later. Stop asking questions unless you want to disappear too. Just like Evelyn. I barely slept after the second message arrived. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Evelyn standing beside a coffin while everyone cried over an empty body. By morning, my grief had transformed into obsession. Caleb sat across from me at my kitchen table while I replayed the anonymous messages again. She is alive. Then, stop asking questions unless you want to disappear too. Caleb leaned back slowly. This isn't a prank. I know. You really think Evelyn's alive. I laughed bitterly. I buried an empty coffin. Caleb. He rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. Did you tell the police? And say what? Hey, my dead wife texted me. Fair point. I stood and paced the apartment. Something's wrong. Everything's wrong. You're sure the number can't be traced? I tried. Caleb grabbed my phone. Let me see. For nearly an hour, he searched through call records and message data, while I sat there feeling like my mind was unraveling. Finally, he frowned. This area code isn't local. Where is it from? A small coastal town about 4 hours away. My chest tightened instantly. Can we go there? Caleb looked at me carefully. You're serious. She lied about dying. I grabbed my jacket. I need answers. The drive felt endless. Rain hammered the windshield while Caleb kept glancing toward me nervously. You haven't stopped shaking since we left, he said quietly. I watched people lower a coffin into the ground. I know. No, I stared out the window. You don't. Silence filled the car after that. By evening, we finally arrived in the small town. It looked quiet and forgettable, the kind of place where nobody asked questions. Caleb parked near the town square. So what now? I checked the anonymous number again. This signal pinged somewhere near here. We spent nearly 2 hours walking through streets, cafes, and small shops before Caleb suddenly grabbed my arm hard. Carter, what? He nodded toward a cafe across the street. My entire world stopped moving. Evelyn sat beside the window, wearing a dark sweater with her hair tied back loosely exactly the way she used to wear at home. Alive. Completely alive. My breathing turned uneven instantly. She looked thinner, nervous, but not frightened, and she wasn't alone. A man sat across from her laughing softly while she stirred coffee absent-mindedly. I recognized him immediately. Adrian Cross, her former fiancé, the man she once claimed she hated. Caleb whispered, "Oh my God." I couldn't speak. I just stared through the rain-covered window while my dead wife smiled at another man. Every emotion inside me exploded together. Relief, shock, rage, betrayal. She's alive, I whispered hoarsely. Caleb grabbed my shoulder. Don't do anything stupid. Too late. I was already crossing the street. Rain poured heavily as I shoved open the cafe door. The small bell above it rang softly, and Evelyn looked up automatically. The color drained from her face instantly. Carter. Adrian froze beside her. I stood there soaked and shaking. You're alive. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Evelyn slowly stood from her chair. How did you find me? I laughed harshly. That's your first question? Carter, you let me bury you. People around us started staring openly now. Adrian stood carefully. Maybe we should talk outside. I turned toward him instantly. Don't speak to me. Evelyn swallowed hard. Please. I walked back outside into the rain before I completely lost control. Seconds later, Evelyn followed me. Water soaked both of us as she stopped several feet away. I can explain. Explain what? I shouted. Explain why I cried over your funeral? Explain why your family lied to me. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Then how was it supposed to happen? She looked away briefly. That hesitation shattered something inside me. You planned this. It started differently, she whispered. You're unbelievable. I needed space. So you faked your death? Tears mixed with rain on her face. I needed to know if you truly loved me. I stared at her in complete disbelief. You destroyed my life to test me. You were becoming distant too. I actually laughed. You vanished with another man. It wasn't about Adrian. The hell it wasn't. She stepped closer desperately. I wanted to see if losing me would matter to you. Matter? My voice cracked violently. I stopped eating Evelyn. She flinched. I couldn't sleep. I continued. I identified your car. I stood beside your coffin. I know. No, you don't know. Her expression finally broke slightly. For 1 second, she almost looked ashamed. Then the cafe door opened behind her. Adrian walked outside, holding an umbrella neither of us wanted. This isn't the full story, he said carefully. I glared at him. You were engaged to her. That ended years ago. Apparently not. Evelyn wiped rain from her face. Adrian helped me disappear. Why? Neither answered immediately. That silence told me everything. What aren't you saying? Adrian sighed heavily. She's in debt. I blinked. What? A lot of debt. Evelyn closed her eyes. Adrian continued carefully. Failed investments. Online trading. Personal loans. I stared at her. How much? Almost $200,000, Adrian admitted quietly. My stomach dropped. That's impossible. It started small, Evelyn whispered weakly. I thought I could fix it before you noticed. You emptied our savings. I meant to replace it. When, I don't know, rain pounded harder around us. I felt physically sick. The fake death, I said slowly. Evelyn started crying openly now. At first it was about escaping everything. Every word felt like another knife sliding deeper into my chest. So my wife died because she owed money? It wasn't supposed to hurt you. I stepped backward from her instantly. You don't get to say that. Carter, you let me mourn you. I panicked. You manipulated everyone who loved you. Adrian suddenly spoke sharply. You need to calm down. I moved toward him instantly. Stay out of this. She's already terrified. She should be terrified. Evelyn covered her mouth while sobbing quietly. For a second, part of me wanted to comfort her automatically. Then I remembered the funeral, the coffin, the lies, and that instinct died immediately. Caleb finally approached from across the street, breathing hard after seeing the confrontation escalate. We need to leave, he warned me quietly. I frowned. Why? He lowered his voice. Because I've been making calls while you were talking. A chill ran through me instantly. What calls? Creditors are already looking for Evelyn. Evelyn's face turned pale. Caleb continued carefully. And if investigators realize a dead woman is walking around alive. Nobody finished the sentence. We didn't need to, because suddenly this wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was fraud. And somehow I was standing directly in the middle of it. The motel room smelled like wet clothes, stale coffee, and panic. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed with her hands trembling while Caleb paced near the window, watching the parking lot outside. Nobody trusted silence anymore. Not after everything. I leaned against the wall staring at the woman I once believed I would spend my entire life beside. You need to tell me everything, I said quietly. Evelyn wiped her swollen eyes. You already know most of it. No, I shook my head slowly. I know lies. I want the truth. She looked down at the floor. For several seconds, the only sound came from rain hitting the motel windows. Then she finally spoke. It started 3 years ago. Caleb stopped pacing immediately. Evelyn swallowed hard. Adrian contacted me after his company launched a new investment project. He promised huge returns if I invested early. I laughed bitterly. And you believed him. At first, it worked. Tears filled her eyes again. The money doubled quickly. I thought I finally found something that could secure our future. Our future? Yes. I stared at her silently. She looked away. I wanted to surprise you someday, she whispered. I wanted us to stop worrying about bills and mortgages and overtime shifts. So instead, you destroyed everything. I know. Caleb crossed his arms. How bad did it get? Evelyn's voice cracked. Worse every month. Adrian kept convincing me to invest more. Then the market collapsed. I frowned. How much money did you lose? All of it. The room fell silent. My savings, she continued weakly. The joint account. Loans. Credit cards. You forged documents too, didn't you? Her silence answered me immediately. I closed my eyes. Oh my God. I was desperate. You committed fraud. I didn't know what else to do. You could have talked to me. Her expression suddenly twisted with frustration. And say what? Hi, Carter. I ruined our lives because I was stupid enough to trust my ex-fiancée. At least it would have been the truth. Tears rolled down her cheeks again. Caleb sat heavily in a chair nearby. So whose idea was the fake death? Evelyn hesitated. Then she whispered Adrian's. Of course it was. He said disappearing temporarily would give us time to move the money safely before investigators noticed. What money? I snapped. You said you lost everything. Not everything, she admitted softly. That answer chilled me instantly. How much is left? Almost $400,000. I stared at her in disbelief. You stole $400,000. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. Stop saying that. My voice exploded so loudly even Caleb flinched. You keep talking like this was an accident. I continued furiously. You planned your own death. Evelyn started crying harder. I was scared. You let your mother bury an empty coffin. She knew eventually. What about Sophie? That question broke her completely. She didn't know. Evelyn whispered. My anger faltered briefly. What? She thought I was really dead. Caleb muttered quietly. Jesus Christ. Evelyn covered her face with both hands. I couldn't tell her. She would have stopped me. So instead you traumatized your little sister? I know. No, I stepped closer slowly. You really don't. She looked up at me with shattered eyes. I thought if you loved me enough, she whispered weakly, you'd never move on. For a moment, I honestly couldn't breathe. You destroyed my life to measure my grief. It sounds horrible when you say it like that. Because it is horrible. She shook violently while crying. I didn't trust anyone anymore. You didn't trust me. I wanted proof. That sentence finally killed something inside me completely. I stared at her quietly for several seconds before speaking again. That's not love, Evelyn. Her face crumpled instantly. That's fear. The room fell into painful silence. Then suddenly Caleb's phone rang. He answered quickly. Yeah. His expression darkened immediately. What? Evelyn looked up nervously. Caleb stood slowly. Where? I straightened. What happened? He lowered the phone carefully. Investigators found financial records connected to Adrian. Evelyn went pale instantly. Caleb continued. They think he's preparing to leave the country. What? Evelyn whispered. He already transferred part of the money overseas. Her breathing became uneven. No. He's been setting up fake passports, too. No, she repeated louder. Caleb looked directly at her now. I think Adrian was planning to disappear alone. The color drained from her face completely. You're lying. I wish I was. Evelyn grabbed her phone instantly and called Adrian. No answer. Again, straight to voicemail. Her hands started shaking uncontrollably. He wouldn't do that to me. I almost laughed at the irony. You trusted the guy who convinced you to fake your death. He said he loved me. And what did that cost? Fresh tears streamed down her face. An hour later, we found Adrian's location through one of Caleb's contacts. An abandoned warehouse near the harbor. The drive there felt suffocating. Evelyn sat silently in the back seat, staring out the window, while rain continued hammering the roads outside. Finally, she whispered, I ruined everything. Nobody answered, because there was nothing left to say. The warehouse looked nearly empty when we arrived, except for one black SUV parked near the loading entrance. Caleb cursed softly. "He's here." We rushed inside. Adrian stood near several large duffel bags stuffed with cash and documents. The moment he saw us, his face hardened instantly. "Evelyn," he said sharply, "what are you doing here? You were leaving?" He glanced toward the bags briefly. "That wasn't the plan. You said we'd disappear together." Plans changed. Her entire body shook. "You used me." Adrian stepped forward impatiently. "You're emotional right now. You were going to abandon me because you became unstable." I stared at him coldly. "You manipulated her from the beginning." Adrian laughed harshly. "She manipulated herself." Evelyn slapped him hard across the face. The crack echoed through the warehouse. "You destroyed my life," she whispered. "No," Adrian snapped back. "You destroyed your own." Suddenly, sirens screamed outside. Adrian's expression changed instantly. "Damn it." He grabbed one of the duffel bags and bolted toward a side exit. Police officers stormed through the warehouse doors seconds later, shouting commands. "Federal agents, don't move." Adrian ran anyway. One officer tackled him violently near the exit while money scattered across the concrete floor. Everything became chaos. Shouting, sirens, footsteps, and in the middle of it all, Evelyn collapsed to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. I stood there watching the woman I once loved break apart completely. Not because she got caught, not because Adrian betrayed her, but because for the first time, she finally saw the truth clearly. Her fear, her pride, her lies, they hadn't protected anyone. They had destroyed everyone. The scandal destroyed my life faster than the funeral ever did. News channels called Evelyn the ghost widow. Online articles turned our marriage into entertainment for strangers who knew nothing about us. Reporters camped outside my apartment building for weeks, hoping to catch me breaking down on camera. Some people treated me like a victim. Others treated me like an accomplice. Honestly, neither felt true anymore. I was just tired, completely tired. Months passed while lawyers, investigators, and court hearings consumed everything. Adrian faced multiple federal charges connected to fraud and money laundering. Evelyn eventually accepted a plea deal to avoid a longer prison sentence. The woman who once laughed beside me in our kitchen now entered courtrooms surrounded by officers and cameras. Every time I saw her, she looked smaller somehow, like guilt had physically hollowed her out. My friendships collapsed almost as quickly as my marriage did. People stopped calling. Neighbors avoided eye contact. Coworkers whispered when I entered rooms. One afternoon, an old friend actually asked me quietly, "Did you know she was alive the whole time?" That question nearly made me laugh, as if surviving betrayal somehow made me suspicious too. Even family gatherings became unbearable. My mother sat across from me during dinner one night and said softly, "You need to leave this city." "I know. She ruined your peace here." I stared down at my untouched food. Part of me still misses her. My mother's expression broke slightly. "You miss the person you believed she was," she said gently. Maybe that was true. Maybe that was the cruelest part of everything. Not losing Evelyn, but realizing the woman I loved might never have existed at all. A few weeks before sentencing, I received a call from Evelyn's attorney. "She wants to meet with you privately." I almost refused immediately, but something inside me needed closure, so I agreed. The meeting happened inside a quiet park near the courthouse. Winter wind moved through the empty trees while gray clouds covered the sky overhead. I spotted Evelyn sitting alone on a bench wearing a long dark coat. For a second, I barely recognized her. The confident woman who once controlled every room she entered was gone. She looked exhausted, fragile, human. I walked toward her slowly. She stood awkwardly when she saw me. Hi. Neither of us knew what to do next. Finally, she sat again, quietly, and I took the opposite end of the bench. "You look different," she whispered. "So do you." A sad smile touched her face briefly. Fair. Silence settled between us. Not angry silence, just empty silence. The kind that comes after everything important has already been destroyed. Evelyn stared at the ground for several moments before speaking again. Sophie still won't talk to me. I nodded slowly. I'm not surprised. My mother barely does either. You lied to them too. I know. Wind moved through the trees above us. Then she whispered something so quietly I almost missed it. I ruined every relationship I had. I didn't answer, because there was nothing comforting left to say. After another long silence, she finally looked at me directly. Did you hate me? The old version of me would have answered immediately. Now I honestly didn't know. I tried to, I admitted quietly. But I looked out across the empty park. But eventually I just felt sad. Tears slowly filled her eyes. For me, for both of us. That answer seemed to hurt her more than anger ever could. She wiped her eyes quickly. I never wanted to destroy your life. You already said that before. This time I mean it. I almost pointed out how meaningless those words had become. But I didn't, because for the first time since all of this began, Evelyn sounded honest. Not manipulative, not defensive, just broken. She stared down at her shaking hands. Do you know what the worst part is? What? I actually convinced myself I was testing love. I stayed quiet. I kept thinking, she continued weakly, if you really loved me, you'd never move on after I disappeared. I closed my eyes briefly. Even now, hearing that still hurt. But real love doesn't work like that, she whispered. No, it trusts. Yes. She nodded slowly while tears rolled down her face. Then finally, she asked the question I think she feared most. Did you ever really love me? I stared at her for several seconds. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I did. And it was painful. I love the version of you that didn't exist, I said quietly. Evelyn broke instantly. Not dramatically, not manipulatively. She just lowered her head and cried silently into her hands while winter wind moved around us. And strangely, I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel revenge. I just felt tired. Because despite everything she did, part of me still mourned the future we were supposed to have together. After several minutes, Evelyn finally looked up again with swollen red eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. This time, I believed she meant it. But some apologies arrived too late to save anything. I stood slowly from the bench. She looked up at me desperately. Carter, I paused. I hope someday you find peace, she said softly. I thought about that for a moment. Then I answered honestly. I think I already started to. And for the first time since her fake funeral, I truly meant those words. I walked away calmly without looking back. No screaming, no revenge, no final dramatic confrontation, just acceptance. Because I finally understood something important. Some people destroy their own lives trying to test love instead of trusting it. And no matter how deeply you care about them, you cannot save someone determined to drown in their own fear. A year later, I moved to another city far from the scandal. I changed jobs, found a small apartment near the water, started rebuilding quietly. Some nights, I still think about Evelyn. I remember her laugh, her smile, the way she used to dance barefoot in our kitchen late at night. And sometimes that still hurts. But the pain no longer controls me. Her choices no longer define my future. The grief eventually stopped feeling like chains around my chest. And one morning, while watching the sunrise alone from my apartment balcony, I realized something unexpected. I was finally free.